Let's rock.
Charlotte, can I start after I introduce? Can I start with Beechwood just so people know it's continued?
Sure.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the September 8th, 2022 meeting of the Cohasset Conservation Committee. I'm Chris McFarland, Chairman of the Conservation Commission. We'll be running tonight's meeting as we implement Massachusetts and Cohasset Wetland Protection Act and Cohasset Stormwater Management Regulations. We'll be operating tonight's meeting using the Zoom platform. At the start of each hearing, we'll elevate applicants to participate. Members of the public wishing to comment should write their names and addresses along with comment in the chat box to be read into the record. If you don't include your name and address, you'll not be recognized. Present this evening on behalf of the commission are our Conservation Administrator, Angela Giso, and Town Conservation Agent, Charlotte Patel. I'll now take roll call of commissioners. Please respond by repeating your name and saying present. Will Ashton is absent tonight. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, present.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, present.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, present.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, present.
Chris McFarland, present. That gives us a quorum of 5 commissioners. We'll be taking votes via roll call with each commissioner answering yay, nay, or abstain. For the record, there are 3 hearings which are continued. 55 South Main Street, 46 Black Rock Road, and 438 Beechwood Street. I'm going to read, we're going to open the Beechwood Street hearing and then continue it to September 22nd. In accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetland Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw, the Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, September 8th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on the Zoom platform for notice of intent 22-31 from Herbert Marsh for septic system repair at 438 Beechwood Street. That hearing is now continued until September 22nd. All right. First hearing this evening is an RDA 22-19. Looks like we already have a question here. Oh, great. Seems like I was having some trouble getting it.
Oh, yeah, I'm actually promoting him shortly for Straits Pond.
Okay. RDA 22-19, it's for sediment sampling at Straits Pond. I need to read this into the public record, please. In accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetland Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw, the Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, September 8th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on a Zoom platform for request for determination of applicability 22-19 for the towns of Cohasset and Hull for proposed sediment sampling at Straits Pond.
Hi, Mitch, can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you all for hearing our submission for the RDA tonight for the sampling in Straits Pond. So just a little background on this project. There's been
Mr. Buck, could I just ask you to
Sure.
state your name and who you're representing before you get started, so it makes it a little easier for meeting minutes to be put together.
No problem. So my name is Mitchell Buck. I am a coastal engineer with the Woods Hole Group, and I am the project manager for the Straits Pond sampling project. And I'm representing on behalf of the town of Hull.
Thank you.
Would you like me to proceed with this?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. Great. So Yeah, so have you all had a chance to review the narrative that we submitted describing the work?
Mitch,
Okay.
would you like me to share my screen, or would you like to pull up the proposal, or whatever's
Sure.
easier?
If you want to share your screen, it might be easier,
Okay, sure.
just in case I have any trouble on my end.
Yeah,
But,
no problem.
And I actually have Dax Stewart, coastal scientist with us, who's on the call. And he is going to be the one who's going to be leading the investigation in the field. And if I may, I might actually turn it over to him so that he can describe the work that's going to be performed and the work that's been completed already, if that's all right.
Absolutely. Just going down to the proposal here. I can start with the variance too, if that's easier.
Okay, so we did file for a variance for this work. It's environmental sampling that's part of a study that's going to help the town of Hull and also the other towns and the technical advisory committee for the Straits Pond help develop a plan to move forward to help provide further the restoration for the pond. And we've demonstrated in here how the project won't have any significant impacts to erosion control or water quality, etc., or wildlife and habitat. It's very targeted sampling. It's going to be one day. It's going to be several core samples that we collected via VibraCore. Dak, do you want to take over and lead it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Mitch. For the record, my name is Dax Stewart. I'm a coastal scientist with Woods Hole Group, and as Mitch said, I'll be leading the field investigation that we are proposing in this RDA. Should I cover background of Straits Pond, or just how should I skip right to the work that's been done already and what we propose to do?
Do any of the commissioners want to hear the background, or do we want to go straight to the proposal?
I think it's worthwhile quickly to go through the background, if we could,
Okay.
please.
Sure.
Certainly. So Straits Pond is part of the Weir River system, which is listed as an area of critical concern. It has a history of eutrophication, poor water quality with high temperatures, low dissolved oxygen, and other factors which have led to nuisance odors, algae blooms, fish kills, and specifically proliferation of midges in the summer. These problems date back to at least 1986, which is the oldest newspaper report that we could find referencing these issues. Tidal flow to the pond is controlled via a culvert and tide gate underneath Nantasket Avenue. In 2010, the old manually controlled tide gates were replaced with twin automated culverts based on recommendations by the Army Corps of Engineers. This allowed for greater and more consistent tidal exchange among, along with other improvements to habitat. However, some of the issues that still were mentioned earlier still are affecting Straits Pond. Based on water level data recorded by a station, I believe operated by the town of Hull, or maybe it's the Technical Advisory Committee, just north of the Nantasket Avenue culvert, and compared to water level elevations inside the pond, they discovered there's a 1.5 foot difference in low tide water surface elevation at low tide, indicating that there's a system of shoals that have been identified just upstream of the culvert. It's believed that by increasing the tidal exchange by removing these shoals will further relieve the eutrophic conditions in the pond and ultimately lead to the original project goals. Some of the material in the present in the channel shoal may have been left over from construction, the 2010 construction of the new culvert. We suspect this because the rocks that were underfoot as we were, I'm in this picture, by the way, rocks that were underfoot were highly angular and looked very much like riprap that was used. If you actually scroll down, Charlotte, there's another picture of the construction of this material is essentially what is at where these shoals are and near surrounding them. In April of this year, Latoll Group completed a topographic survey using a sub-centimeter accuracy GPS to collect horizontal and vertical datums in the area approximately from the culvert to about 500 feet upstream. During this investigation, we also probed the bottom, both with a stainless steel spike, attempting to identify what the shoal's material is. And the maximum penetration of that and with a shovel was only a few inches at best. So both us and a 2007 Lewis Berger report hypothesized that this material could potentially be bedrock. But what we're proposing today is an exploratory survey to actually determine the physical nature of these shoals by mechanically vibrating a stainless steel spike into the sediment from a shallow draft survey vessel. If the spike is able to penetrate any significant distance, we will attempt to vibrate 2-inch highly carbonate core barrels into the sediment to collect samples, approximately at 6 locations. The image you see here is these are where we had collected samples with a shovel. I was only able to get basically the top 6 inches or so, but we want to be able to get deeper than that. Yeah, these are the proposed sample locations, which are each of them is on top of one of the identified shoals. We intend to collect cores that are approximately 4 feet long, would be ideal. The sediment cores would be split and described by a trained sedimentologist with subsamples sent to the labs for analysis, grain size. The volume of sediment we propose to remove is less than.
Sorry, could I interrupt? Mr. Buck, would you mind just muting? I'm getting some feedback from your setup over there.
My apologies.
No worries. Thanks.
The volume of sediment total, assuming we're able to collect all 6 cores in 4 foot length, is approximately the size of maybe 1 wheelbarrow full of sediment. So it's quite small. The collection process would not increase turbidity or pose any negative effect on water quality or the fauna or flora in the area. It would be a single day sampling and excuse me, time permitting, we would also propose to collect bathymetric elevation of the bottom data in both the upper reaches of the pond and also near the culvert again. And that would be a non-destructive passive survey only with a echo sounder from a vessel. This project has previously presented as an RDA to the Town of Hull Conservation Commission on August 16th, and it received an approval for negative determination. Given the shared shoreline between the towns of Hull, Cohasset, and just downstream of Hingham, and the ACEC, which occupies this entire area, we present this project for review, even though typically we would not do this for what is essentially just field work only. But Mitch, anything to add?
Not too much. I just say that yes, this type of work is just environmental sampling. It's we do this work fairly often, and because of the it's a Town Hall project, and that town of Cohasset shares, or owns a portion of the pond. The town is trying to engage Hull is trying to engage Cohasset in a productive manner and potentially get some answers that help us develop a plan for moving forward. One of the answers that might come out of this, and just right here, I'll just let you know, we did notify all the abutters within the 300-foot distance of the water line, as shown here, and we have in the proof as was submitted. But as far as results, we hope to get out of this. We hope to find out how to have determine what this material is in the shoals and determine whether it could be removed or not. If it's bedrock, it would be very difficult to remove and it might not be possible. But if it's simply a lot of cobble and coarse grained sediments, it might be something you can get in there eventually with, say, a mini excavator on a platform and target removal of this material. A portion of which we think is actually construction debris, anthropogenic source that we'd like to remove from the system. The tide range is restricted. The high tide isn't restricted. The low tide drainage is restricted by about a foot. So there's an additional foot or so that we could gain by removal of these shoals, and the further draining will help the system flush and breathe and hopefully improve water quality and habitat. And so we're just taking the first step here. And then once we have those results, the plan is to write up a technical memorandum with the results and recommend some paths forward. And those will be shared with the commissions as well as technical advisory committee and for feedback, and we'll go from there.
Chris, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Any questions by commissioners? No?
Yeah, I just have one or two. So, Mr. Stewart, how will you distinguish large cobbles and larger but loose material when you're out there probing? Let's say you encounter something that's, say, 2 or 3 feet wide, but it's actually not bedrock itself. How will you distinguish those from true bedrock?
Well, for vibrating the spike into the sediment, for example, if we were to reach refusal, we wouldn't really know what is preventing it from going any deeper. Odds are, if it did hit something of large diameter like a boulder, then we would just have to assume that we just note that it hit refusal. We wouldn't just take a single test at each site. We'd probably do several within a small area, just for exactly that reason. If it went down once and stopped, but if we moved a few feet away and tried it again, then if it went down further. But within the sediment, we would not know if it was bedrock or a boulder, for example.
So there's been some speculation about this shoal off and on for quite a while. One of the hypotheses is that it's debris that was left over from construction of the church around the turn of the 20th century, that they disposed of some of their stone actually in there. That's one hypothesis. The other one is there was a mill on the Hull side, but no bridge that connected the mill to Cohasset. Therefore, anybody that wanted to use that mill from Cohasset, any of the farmers on the Cohasset side, would have had to get across that channel. And there's some speculation that fill had been added there, so at low tide they could cart their grain across the channel to reach the mill. So there's quite a lot unknown about this pre 20th century history here of this site, and so it's entirely possible that there's more than one source of anthropogenic debris in there, let's say. Not just the most recent work in 2010, but maybe in 1910
Mhm.
and perhaps even in 1810. So again, that the issue of the size of the sediment there could really be deceptive, I'd say. Maybe very difficult to determine that without actually getting in there and trying to move things around a little bit with a piece of machinery or a crowbar or so, big pry bar or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, I think even if this vibracoring process is not successful or isn't as successful as we'd like, then we could propose that getting an excavator out there to try to get more material than just trying to penetrate a spike through. However, that would be a completely different proposed, and that would be perhaps a bit more not disruptive to the surrounding environment, because you would be producing turbidity and things of that nature then.
So
And so I'll just be clear, there's no excavator or plan for an excavator to do any sort, do any sort of work like that at this moment.
Right.
We consider this a first step to help try to further identify the material that's here and identify a path forward, which they're like, if for instance, it shows that there's, material in here that, could be dredged, then, we potentially could go down that path if, the towns are on board. And there would be more sampling. We likely, it's possible we need a sampling analysis plan with the Corps and have to do a full suite of grain size analysis. And if there's fine materials, other chemical sampling and such. So, right now we're just taking the field work a step further to see if we can help characterize the material. And we're not trying to document every stone that's out there. It's not an archaeological survey based upon, the mass mapper and such. There's not a historical, site in the river in this location. So, we're mindful that there's, some history here. And, this is pretty routine sediment, environmental sampling that we do.
Is the tool gas powered?
Yes, it's
It
run
is.
from a diesel generator, I believe.
Charlotte, do you want to scroll down and show the setup on the boat? I think we've got a few photos at the end.
You're muted.
Sorry, it might be I think it's a different document. Give me one moment. I can pull that up.
So this is the rig right here. You can see. So you can see there's a little, essentially snowblower sized or leaf blower sized engine on there. Runs off just a tank just on top of there. And yeah, it's a pretty concise setup. The boat's constructed of two small aluminum skiffs or john boats that have been fabricated together into this shallow water platform, and it uses electric trolling motors typically to get around, which allows them to navigate the shallow water.
Any further questions or comments? Any comments by the public? Okay. If we were to approve this RDA, does anyone have any conditions? No?
No,
Okay. Then I will make a motion to close the public hearing and to issue a -2 determination for RDA 22-19. Do I have a second?
second,
second,
Having a motion second to issue a -2 determination for RDA 22-19. We'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, I.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
and Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 5-0. We also need to, I'll make a motion to issue a variance for work within the resource area. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second.
Having a motion and a second to issue a variance for work within the resource area. We'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, I.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 5-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Okay. Our next hearing this evening is NOI 22-25, which is at 10 Mohawk Way for landscape vegetation continued from August 25th, 2022.
Sorry, I don't know if I missed something when I was rejoining. Am I good to go?
You know, we're just getting everyone on board here.
I don't see the owners in the audience, Josh, but we do have Love here.
I think that's all we have. Me and
Okay.
Love.
Okay, can we bring up a plan, please?
Yep, I'll bring it up. All set.
Yep, there we are.
So for the record, Josh Green from Maryland Engineers Land Affairs. Since the last meeting, we reviewed the comments from the last meeting and just decided that the contentious part of the project was the plantings within the lawn area. With that being the case, just to keep the project moving, we decided to remove them. It's still something that the applicant's interested in. So when discussing it with Charlotte, we talked about the potential of coming back later on to go through an RDA to go for that, just once they've got this stuff done, because a big portion of this project is the trees just for safety reasons. So like I said, just to keep things moving with taking them off. And not to say that there isn't any mitigation on this, the privacy plantings still consist of, I believe, about 8 trees. So while they're removing 2 would be healthy trees inside the buffer zone and 1 storm damage one, they are replanting trees. So I don't want to think that there's just no mitigation anymore. There are still plantings being proposed.
Excuse me, could you expand the, make it larger, please, the drawing?
Yep. Any area specifically, Eric?
The area you're focusing on, which, which is the work area, that's good.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's pretty much the exact same as last time. It's just the mitigation plantings within the lawn area have been removed.
Mitigation.
And with that, I moved the erosion control up too. That was another change.
I'm sorry, the red line is the 50-foot buffer zone?
Nope, green line is the 50-foot. I just moved this along just so that there was enough area to move in between the deck. It's lawn area, so there wouldn't be disturbance here. It's just simply to give a good limit of work for the contractors.
Okay, all right.
So is the lawn now gonna continue to be left to grow? Or are they gonna revert to mowing it, I guess?
I believe right now it'll be planned to be maintained as a lawn, so mowing until they come back and decide to go forward with the mitigation plantings as previously proposed.
Okay.
And the tree removal you mentioned, that's all with between the 50 and the 100, correct?
These two are within the 50 to 100, but this one that was damaged by storm, so it's already partly fallen over, is within the 50. So the variance is still, we altered the variance application to just include this, but yeah, that is still within the 50-foot.
Okay. So your primary method of controlling any future invasives is the lawnmower, correct?
Yeah, in the meantime,
Yeah, okay.
which I believe Love touched on last time, and Love, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was few to be found in the area.
I didn't find any, actually, surprisingly so.
I walked down there and I certainly found some on the other side, maybe, on the area that's not mowed, but that's not our concern here, all right? You turn your back and you're gonna have invasives, but if you're gonna mow it, you have nothing to worry about.
Thank you. Also, the homeowners wanted you to know that they are on here somewhere. They can see you and hear you, but they wanted you to know that they were in attendance, so.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments by commissioners? Any comments by the public?
Yeah, I'll just say I was not present at the meeting. I did watch the video and yeah, I'm in favor of their initial approach, really rewilding the buffer zone. So I hope they do come back at some point with the plan after their construction's done.
Thank you for that encouragement, Mr. McIntyre.
Okay, if there's no other comments, I will I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and issue an order of conditions for NOI 22-25 at 10 Mohawk Way. Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a motion second to issue an order of conditions for NOI 22-25, we'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, that vote passes 5-0. And we'll have to also make a motion to issue a variance for the removal of the tree within the 50-foot buffer, as well as kind of minor infringement into the 50-foot buffer as they build the deck. Do I have a second?
Second,
Having a motion and second to issue a variance for work at 10 Mohawk Way. We'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
And thank you all very much.
Okay.
Good
evening.
night.
Welcome.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Our next
Chris,
hearing this
Chris, may I ask
evening,
you, Chris, may I ask you a
Go ahead.
question on that? We had a variance for infringement into the 50-foot buffer zone for work on the deck. I assume we're doing that because it's already a developed area.
yes,
Yeah, I mean, there's already lawn there and bushes and everything else, because we
Yes.
normally would not have done that if it was, virgin ground and all that, so.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, our next hearing this evening is ANRAD 22-29 at 1 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. I need to read this into the record. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetland Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw, the Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, September 8th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on a Zoom platform for an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation, ANRAD, for the presence of wetland resources at 1 Chief Justice Cushing Highway for Evoke Wellness.
All set? Good evening. Jim Burke with DeSalle Burke Sala, here representing Evoke Wellness Rehabilitation Center at 1 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. Charlotte, Pat Magoon is online as well. I'm having problems with my VPN, so I
Yes,
don't
thank
have
you.
that. Yeah,
My computer is promoting people very slowly tonight, so I apologize for that.
I don't think it's just you. I think, yeah, mine is terrible tonight. Yes, Pat.
Great. Thanks, Charlotte.
I'll do the narrative on this particular filing. So Pat, if you could throw up the plan, that'd be great.
Yeah. All right, should be seeing it shortly.
There you go. Thanks, Pat.
Yep.
So you're looking at, kind of an isolated lot, kind of a pork chop lot located right on the Hingham Cohasset border. It's you know, a multi-bed rehabilitation center with, you know, pretty sitting at the on slope of a fairly steep knoll. Ecotech out of Worcester, who I've used for, I don't know, 30 years, flagged the wetlands for me. I asked them to specifically to take a look at some previous filings done by Dale Consulting when they put in the SAS, the leach field down the base of the hill for wastewater treatment, wastewater discharge. They have a groundwater discharge permit on this particular site. And Scott delineated the BVW at the base of the hill. He did take a look at the filings that the delineation that Dale did, I think in like 90 or 91, and didn't find anything that fell into the current wetlands definition in Massachusetts. It kind of makes sense to me, only from a standpoint, from a hydrology standpoint. I don't know where you get the hydrology on a 4-to-1 slope like that, but that's the report was kind of revised to explain that particular non-delineation, if you will. But what you're looking at is you know, like I say, BVW associated with floodplain at the corner of the lot. And we're looking to see if you guys find that delineation acceptable.
Well, I've read through this report, and we recently looked at an area that is just to the west of the rehab center that belongs to the Cohasset Conservation Trust, administered by the trustees of foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And what we discovered there was that there is discharge that forms a wetland on the hillside there. There's Phragmites, there is hydric soil, there are a number of wetland plants, and this appears to be discharging at a certain elevation here on this drumlin. It's recharged at the top of the hill, and it must be meeting some sort of impermeable layer in the lodgement till there. And it's, like I say, it's right at the same elevation, basically as the lawn surrounding the rehab center, which was, at the time we were there, was sodden, we'll call it. So I'm not surprised at all that another wetland scientist had identified areas of discharge that had some characteristics of wetlands even lower on the slope.
Well, there is no, I mean, the delineation that Dale had, they're not even close to where the discharge is for the parking lot. So, you know, Pat, can you zoom in a little bit?
Yep. Can you show us what the old boundary that this 1990s investment?
Yeah, it's if you go, is north straight up on the page?
It's right.
Okay, it's okay. So it's on basically the slope of the hill. So it's to the south of where the discharge pipe for the sewer is. So you know, or east of the wastewater treatment plant itself. So yeah, right in there. So that's where Dale had the delineation. Pat, if you go slide up to the park, you can see, actually, you can see the drain line going off to the south. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Bell, Tom?
No, actually, I'm talking about the property that's adjacent to it. And again, I'm not at all surprised that there's discharge on the slope itself. I noticed in your report that somebody did identify stands of Phragmites. It's not clear where they were, how big they were. They were rather casually mentioned and dismissed, it looked like, because there didn't seem to be any other wetland plants that have been identified, which is kind of inconsistent with what we saw right next door. There's Phragmites there. There's actually quite a few different wetland plants there, a community of wetland plants. And certainly hydric soils, there's discharge of iron oxides right at surface. So we know that there's reduced iron just below the surface. So I really would like to see the boundaries of the 1990s wetland to compare them with what you guys now are showing us.
Well, the only thing I have is an 8.5 by 11, section of the plan. So I don't have, that's all I have. And and I sent that to Scott, and I haven't asked, look at that specifically and based it, and I'll put Scott Morrison up against anybody with regards to delineating wetlands in accordance to Massachusetts regulations. And I trust him implicitly from a conservative standpoint for delineations and also for accuracy. So I certainly can understand your concern, Mr. Bell. I think honestly, it sounds like we need a site walk to establish this. And I would look to schedule that.
I think that is a good idea.
Jim, I just had a quick question. So upon the entrance into the Evoke Wellness Center, they actually have a really old DEP sign that was from a 1999 notice of intent. Was that around the time of the delineation?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it probably, I bet to that 99 one is probably related to something that, the path, the abutters were doing, to tell you the truth. There's a significant amount of wetlands down along, Cushing Highway and the like, and the paths that people walk around. But yeah, I think if we did, do you have the file from 91 or when the wastewater treatment plant was built?
Sadly, no. I actually did try to look for it, but it was unclear what our submission number was. So it was hard for me to track it down, but I did kind of want to look at that because I was curious if that was related to any of the delineations, maybe along the road here or, elsewhere on the site. But yeah, it's an old DEP sign that's posted right on one of the utility poles as you're entering the facility. And I was like, oh, what's that number? And it's from a 1999 notice of intent. So,
yeah. So yeah, like I say, I mean, did I send you the Daler, little 8.5 by 11 Daler copy?
I don't think so, but it might be good to look at that maybe with a site walk if that's what he wants
Pat,
to
can
do.
you dig that up?
Let me see if I can. I think I just found it. One sec. I'm gonna try to share this again. Whoops. Sorry about this. Let's see.
I would have had Scott Morrison on tonight, but he's got meetings every night himself.
All right, here we go.
So there's your wastewater treatment plant, and that's the delineation I had. Does that correspond to what you were thinking about, Mr. Bell?
It's possible, yeah. It's not necessarily discharging at the same elevation everywhere, but the wetland we looked at was about 1/4 mile long and about 50 feet wide, and it was on the slope.
Yeah, like I could see some groundwater breakout where
That's exactly that's exactly what it's about. It's groundwater discharge.
As long as the vegetation is there, I can certainly see how that could happen. But like I said, when we were walking it, it just didn't look like it was wetlands, to tell you the truth. So, but like I said, I think a site walk is certainly warranted. And
let's go out there and take a look at it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, so Charlotte, can you work with the applicant to set up a site visit potentially next week? And in the meantime, we can continue this until September 22nd? Mr.
That's
Burke,
fine.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, I'm on vacation, but you don't need me. You need Scott Morrison. So I'll have to get a hold of Scott and I'll just gum up the works. And I'll see what his availability is and work with Charlotte.
Okay, very good. Then we will continue this hearing until September 22nd.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
They have the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean Hull Street?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, our next hearing this evening is NOI 22-12 and Stormwater Permit 22-08 for 221 Hull Street, which has been continued since June 16th, 2022.
Yep. All right, I'll bring up the plan set on my screen, just a sec. All right. Everybody see that? All right.
Yes.
Okay. So coming back to you again, so I won't go too far into detail of what's there. It's an existing vacant lot with the 100-foot slightly encroaching of the riverfront to Turkey Hill Run, and the 200-foot, which is the real one we're dealing with here. So existing conditions, we did go out and locate a clearing line, and we added that to the plan. So that's one thing that did change since we've seen you last on the existing conditions. Moving to the construction management, there's a few things on here that we've worked on since the last time we've met. Most notably, the amount of tree removal, not just total, but also within the riverfront. We were previously proposing to remove 5 trees at a total of, we had 78 inches between the 5 of them. We have that down to 0 within the riverfront. And as well, outside the riverfront, we had 13 at, what do we got? 203 calipers were previously proposed to be removed, which is now down to 10 at 151 inches combined between those 10. Another thing we changed was disruption to, or alteration, I guess, to that riverfront area. One thing that has remained the same is this alteration down here that has not changed at all. That is the 704 square feet. We're proposing to put the new driveway in there and new vegetation, and they cancel out 1 for 1 in that regard. Over here, we have 763 square feet of disturbance, which is down 100 square feet, I believe, from, we had 863 in this area, or it was in a different area, but it was more over here, and that was for a driveway, walkway, and a bit of a wall. As you'll see as I move forward, that's no longer the case. So I'll show you this table that I've put together here. So we have total of 1467 total disturbed area. That's down from, what do we have, 1579. The replicated driveway is 425 square feet, and the replicated vegetation adjacent to that driveway is 279 square feet, bringing us to that 763 that you see here, which is associated with a proposed rain garden. The proposed layout has changed pretty significantly. We reduced the building down to 2,705 square feet. That's a reduction of about 720 square feet. We've also, as I mentioned briefly, this driveway configuration has changed. It was previously proposed to come up in here for a little turnaround area, and the building was bigger, kind of pushing that driveway out. So we've tucked that back to stay out of the riverfront. We're actually not proposing to now, as opposed to before, there's no net increase of impervious area within the riverfront. Along the driveway here, you'll see kind of a stone revetment we're proposing. And you'll see that better, I guess, on the grading sheet with as to why we're doing that. But basically, as far as the layout goes, we've just tightened it up, moved it out of the riverfront, tightened the building up a bit. Onto the grading, as you'll see. So the stone revetment is, to support the driveway. Its highest point, we have the driveway elevation of 39, bottom of wall down here at 37. So it's really not, significantly tall, 2 feet at its maximum. these points along here till it feathers out to nothing. You'll see the proposed rain garden up here. We previously had it a lot significantly closer to that rock face. It was less than 5 feet before. Now we have about 25 feet to that rock face. And you'll see this is that 763 square feet of disturbance. It's all due to this proposed rain garden. The rain garden has increased in size a bit, and it's proposed to be, we have landscaping plans. It's supposed to be mulch and seed with wetland species there. The rain garden, like before, collects all the flow from the building, which gets directed like before to a cistern, which has an overflow outlet and goes into the rain garden. The driveway flows and a portion of these backyard flows eventually reach the end of the driveway, hit a vegetated strip, which our landscape architect has proposed some plantings in with Cohasset approved native species, and it eventually reaches the rain garden. The rain garden, we provided the calcs in the report. It does meet standard 3 and 4. And from there, the overflow, we have 2 overflows that, so when the bigger storms, when it can't hold it, it overflows out here and down to Hull Street, much like it is currently. Another thing we did with the grading is in the back here to eliminate some of the earthworks was we're proposing to not do any earthworks back here. So that'll stay the same. And all the main grading is, in relation to the proposed rain garden, driveway and building and, utilities, the necessary utilities. And here is the utility plan to kind of show that the capture of the roof flow to the cistern, and it overflows out into the rain garden. I think I kind of hit on the big items, big changes we made. But I'm sure that you guys have questions. I'd be more than happy to answer.
I'm trying to understand your rain garden there, and I think it absorbs a great deal of moisture. When it absorbs it, where does it go?
It will go
Because
into the
I
ground.
understand you're sitting on ledge there, right?
Correct. So we plan to excavate down below the basin of the rain garden about 4.5 feet or so, and bring in, proper material as much as possible. And below that have gravel with underlying pipe to try to aid in that. And then what doesn't go through is going to run off towards Hull Street.
Okay, so you're going to have 4.5 feet of collected water there in the rain garden, all right? I suppose up until the upper edge. What happens then to the water?
Anything below the berm outlet will eventually drain out through exfiltrate.
So you're going to have a marsh, basically, all right? It'll be full of water for the most part during intensive storms, correct?
If I may, if I can interrupt 1 second. Because I think I understand what you're trying to say. We did some test pits in the area that we got down to about 7 feet. So it's not all ledge in that area, so it's not going to create any sort of like bowl, if you will. The intent of this rain garden is to mimic exactly what's going on there right now. And it's really to allow the water to join the groundwater flow that currently exists on the site. We're trying to redirect it away from the wall. We had a site walk with Mr. Bell, and I thought it helped incredibly much to really kind of push us towards in this direction. I think that for the amount of infrastructure proposed for the single family house, I think it'll work great. And I think from a standpoint of how the water will flow, what this design represents is kind of what the current site does, and maybe a little bit more in a concentrated fashion. But
Okay.
what's going to happen, I think, is it's going to flow under the surface towards Hull Street.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
I think this is a real improvement over the initial plans. Really reducing the footprint of the house, moving the rain garden, preserving more of the trees, particularly right there at the rain garden. That, in my mind, has a lot of merit. I recall that, Mr. Burke, that you mentioned that you had put in some test pits, maybe where that leader, where it says proposed rain garden, leads in, somewhere in that neighborhood there. Yeah.
I can pull up the existing conditions where they actually exactly
With the
were.
pits, yeah. I mean, I don't recall seeing any pits where the rain garden is actually going to be located. No. But I thought you guys referred to some information you had about that. We talked about it in the field, that the soil was fairly deep there, where at the sort of the west end of where you're going to put that rain garden. Maybe I don't remember this quite correctly. So in any case, we do have sort of a requirement, I would say, or at least a strong suggestion that we see test pits wherever you're going to try to get water to infiltrate.
Yeah,
And
sure. That's understandable. Yeah, when we went up there, I had a hard kind of fast design going along that wall
Yeah.
with a release, conventional point discharge release that was part of the original design. And that's kind of why we concentrated in that particular location. You know, and now you with us kind of taking advantage of the cleared area, and you can kind of see where, you know, if you look at the plan where the tree line is, we take a lot of advantage of where that is. And I think honestly, if I can get, you know, 6 feet right in that location, and based on the topography and the way how the test pits worked, because if you look at where the excavated areas were that were left excavated, you can see
Yeah.
the rock just kind of creep up the hill. We had more depth as you get closer to Hull Street. So I would imagine that's going to remain the same. Now,
I think we'd still like to see verification of that.
Sure.
I agree with you completely
Yeah.
here, and I think that this is probably the best place on the site that you could put this infiltration
Okay.
device. And I'd just like to see a soil pit or two within the perimeter of that rain garden as verification.
Do you see where that conifer number 10?
Or at the least, let me change that a little bit. If those trenches actually run through there, if you just plotted them on the map, that'd certainly convince me that you had enough soil there. Because they've already trenched down quite a ways in a couple of those.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think we located those. That would have been smart.
No,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Okay, I mean, I guess the easy thing would be to do is to go out and just GPS the old excavation
Yeah.
and get them back on the plan.
Yeah.
And if it falls in there, then we're golden.
Yeah.
If not, and if it doesn't, then we can come up there with a machine and pop another hole in. We've come this far.
Yeah.
So
I'd agree with that. I mean, that makes the most sense. If those pits have already demonstrated the depth of the soil there, then really there's no point in putting in more holes in the ground.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's quick and cheap. So yeah.
Okay, that's fair. As far as the design goes, and if say we get we can confirm the depth for the rain garden. What are your thoughts with regard to the design? And just so before you answer that, the owner, our client, and the abutter for at Grace Road are in discussions now with regards to the driveway and what's going to be constructed. And so they have an attorney and we have an attorney, and the attorneys are talking. So just to give you that piece of information, we're moving forward on all fronts at this point. So if everyone likes the design, you know, if you have any other revisions to make, that any concerns, and you're right, Mr. Bell. Can I call you Tom? I'm such a singer.
Yeah, sure.
All right, sorry about that. And so Tom, you know, if there are any other revisions, now's the time to make them, because we worked hard in getting this to this point, and trying to minimize the work out here. So if any other comments from other commissioners at this time would be incredibly helpful, because I'd love to button this up the next time.
I don't have any further comments. I think that this is probably, the design is a big improvement over your initial submission. And it looks like it's going to work to me. Assuming you can get sufficient infiltration there at your rain garden. Yeah, looks good.
Tom, I have no further comments either, but I just want to make sure that we're kind of looking in the same area. You're saying maybe information there and maybe information here?
Yeah,
Correct.
that's it.
Exactly.
Got
Right.
it.
Okay, well,
And my recollection is those trenches run, maybe they're a little bit uphill from that.
They're up. I think they're a little uphill from that, but like I said, I can have my guys out there, tomorrow, and if I miss, where they are, I'll still have them located on the plan, and so we'll know where that depth is. And if I have to get a machine up there, I'll get a machine up there and we'll pop a hole. I'll let Charlotte know.
Sounds good to me.
So, Mr. Burke, what I recommend is once you look at where those trenches are cut, if there's any question that they're not in an area right where it says lot 3 or where the area that extends into the 200-foot riverfront, if there's any question in your mind that more information is needed, just reach out to Charlotte, show it to her. She'll pass it on to Tom, and we'll make a determination whether or not you have to, whether it's good enough or whether it has to be cut a little further. And that we'll just make sure that, that we can wrap this up, assuming that no other commissioners have questions or concerns.
My perspective about the outer 100 feet of the riverfront is the fact that they're going to put in a rain garden with native plants is probably sufficient to kind of maintain at least the spirit of protecting the resources. As I maybe say too often, the riverfront is the resource.
Right.
Yes.
That we're protecting. It's not a buffer to the resource. It is the resource. So this definitely is a situation where native plants are going in. It's going to infiltrate into that riverfront area, and particularly like the idea that rain gardens are pretty effective at removing nitrates and certainly sediment. So I think that this is a fairly good solution to their design.
Tom, I think rain gardens do exactly what you say when there's an effective maintenance program, which is implemented to maintain over the next 5, 10, 15 years, the ecological vitality of the rain garden, which is something you're going to have to check, Charlotte, all right? We're going to need a very, very thorough maintenance plan here for the rain garden. So.
Good point, Eric. Really good point.
I guess the advantage of that particular situation is that the runoff entering that is, from the driveway is so small, and the roof runoff is being sent through some cisterns. So the the water entering this rain garden is going to be fairly minimal with regards to the pollutants and the like, but I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
It seems like the cistern would trap sediment before it ever got to the rain garden.
For that.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be a koi pond.
Feed the hawks.
There we go.
Spread bass. Spread bass.
And you can eat the koi and remove the nitrate that way.
How about some koi on the Barbie? There you go.
Put
And
that in the order.
Charlotte, all the post-development numbers worked out, correct?
I believe so, yes. I can double check that. It sounds like we want to circle back at the next meeting. Is that?
Yes, yes, we're going to continue this
yeah.
hearing till,
Yeah, I think all the post-construction numbers are equal to or lower than pre-construction, but I'll just triple check that.
okay. So I'd like to continue this hearing until September 22nd, where the applicant will just review the test pit data, and we'll hopefully be able to take a vote on it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the night.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, our next hearing this evening is NOI 22-30. It's a new hearing, so I have to read it into public record. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetland Bylaw, and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw, the Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, September 8th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on a Zoom platform for a notice of intent 22-30 by Francesco and Tracy Agostino to add an attached garage to property at 34 Lambert Lane.
Hi, Greg, can you hear us?
Yep, good evening. So
I don't think I see the owners on the call, but yeah,
Okay,
might just be us.
okay. Do I have screen sharing capability?
Yep.
Please.
Great, thank you. For the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer, Morse Engineering. I'm representing the property owner, Francesco and Tracy Agostino. I'm going to pull up their plan on the screen here. What brings us before you tonight is a notice of intent for their home located at 34 Lambert's Lane. They're proposing to construct a garage addition on the side of their house. Looking at the plan, you see Lambert's Lane at the bottom of the page here. This solid black line represents their property line. The property itself is about 4.5 acres in size. This is the location of the existing home. The wetlands that exist at the site, there are 2 of them. Running in the back right here, this is Turkey Hill Run, which is a perennial river. And extending off of that, we have highlighted in purple right here, the 100-foot inner riparian zone. And then the 200-foot riverfront area is off-site. Okay, so the entire site itself is located within the riverfront area. Secondly, highlighted in blue is a bordering vegetated wetland, which abuts Turkey Hill Run and then extends obviously around the side of the house here. Wetlands on this site were delineated by John Zimmer of South River Environmental during April of 2022. In looking at the proposed project is the construction of this garage addition right here. It's a 2-car addition. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. What you'll see is that garage addition, approximately half of it is over in an area that's existing asphalt driveway. The remainder of the addition is over an area that's existing lawn surface. What we've proposed to do is in the back of the house, what we've highlighted in green, this is existing impervious surface. This is the existing driveway and a patio. That green area would be removed as mitigation for the increase in impervious surface with the garage here. Overall, it results in an additional 236 square feet of impervious surface to the site, which represents a 0.1% increase in the impervious within the riverfront area. It's well under the standards for riverfront with riverfront requirements, you're allowed to alter up to 10% of your riverfront area, which would be 17,000 square feet in this case. We're coming in well under that at approximately 11,000 square feet.
Excuse me, Greg, whose standard is that?
That's straight out of the Wetlands Protection Standards, 310 CMR 10.58.
Okay,
The other standard we look at is that the work is no closer to any of the resource areas than the existing conditions. Highlighted in red, this is the 50-foot wetland buffer zone to the BVW around the site. What you'll notice, again, this area that's green, that's existing driveway up to this point. The existing driveway exists at a distance of 14 feet right here from the edge of the BVW. That driveway all gets removed. With the construction of the new addition, all of the driveway now is outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. We think that is an enhancement on the site as well. In addition, and kind of secondary to the home addition here, they are proposing to construct a generator pad on the back of the addition right here. It's approximately 15 square feet in size, would be a generator pad, and to build a subsurface propane tank outside of the 50-foot buffer, which would service that generator. They have proposed erosion control barrier, which is what this dashed line represents around the limit of work. They've proposed along the edge of the driveway a crushed stone trench right here, as well as roof dry wells to handle any runoff off the roof of the addition. Because of the small size of the project, it did not trigger the stormwater bylaw, but they have implemented those mitigating measures in good faith. I turn it over to you.
Greg, do you have grading on this for this plan?
So we're not proposing any change in grade. The driveway, the slab of the garage is going to match the existing driveway. We're not proposing to bring any fill around the back of it or alter the grades in any way.
So, but it will be slightly higher than the driveway, I take it?
So the slab of the garage will be at the elevation of the drive, maybe an inch higher. Yeah.
Okay. So drainage is back towards Lambert's Lane, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Morris, what do you propose to replace? What are you going to do with the area that you're going to remove the impervious area? Is that going to be landscaped, or what's going to happen there?
Yeah. So it's approximately 310 square feet. It's just going to be loam and seed.
So you're going to replace it with lawn, essentially?
Correct. There's lawn adjacent to it.
Have you considered an alternative of moving the driveway or moving the garage over the existing driveway?
So the existing house outline is right here. So we were trying to construct the garage off the side of the house. You'll notice that the garage has been brought forward on the property, basically to the minimum front yard setback in the zoning district.
Oh, yeah.
So we tried to keep it as far away as we could from the resource area.
What year was this house built?
I don't have the date on me at the moment. If you give me a minute, I'll look it up though.
That's all right.
Okay.
so Greg, the green area behind the house, going down to the BVW, that will be flat, sloping? Will there be a retaining wall? What is back there?
It's flat surface, and it would just be grass.
Flat surface, and then it runs out, and then it goes down dramatically into the river area? Is that?
Yeah, so you'd see right here the contours. It's existing lawn with a fence at the top of embankment, if you would, and then just beyond the fence, the contours drop down 3 to 4 feet to the river.
Okay. What erosion controls do you have to prevent that the river from washing away your fence and moving toward the house, the bank of the house?
Sure. So the erosion control is this black line right here. The only excavation that would be happening on the site would be, a 4-foot frost wall for the garage, and then excavation for the dry wells over here, which would be for the roof leaders. This is just removal of asphalt, essentially say it's 2 inches thick, and then there'd be loam and seed put in its place. But the erosion control barrier is a staked silt sock. We have a detail of it on the plan over here. It's 12 inches in diameter. It has wooden stakes through it.
What will be the specification of the loam?
At the limit of
being,
work.
Greg?
It also is backed up with the specification of what?
Of the loam, because you are within the 50-foot buffer zone, and we don't allow just any material to be brought in.
Typically, loam is screened loam. That would be suitable for a lawn purpose. We're not bringing in general fill. We're not altering the grades here. They want to establish a lawn. So it would be screened loam that gets put down with grass seed on top.
Okay.
So our standard conditions would prohibit the use of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizer in proximity to the stream. And of course, we're talking about applying that to help with 310 square feet. Would your client be amenable to ceasing any fertilization and use of herbicides on the rest of their lawn?
And I think if you issue your order, it would be applicable to the entire property.
Okay. Greg, I assume Turkey Hill run here ends up at Straits Pond?
Yes, it does ultimately.
Yeah. So any runoff from the driveway, soap, detergent, oil, whatever maybe will be headed towards Straits Pond. What sort of channelization do you have to make sure that fluids of an automotive nature from driveway and do not make its way down to Straits Pond?
Sure. What I would say right now is that this green area in its entirety, as well as this driveway here underneath the existing or the proposed garage, all drains right now directly into the river. That driveway exists. It's only 8 feet from the edge of the river currently. With the proposal here, with the garage, that entire driveway area gets cut off. So any vehicles now are not stored outside, but they're stored under a garage surface. Secondly, anything that's in the driveway, now the driveway is entirely outside the 50-foot buffer to the river.
Yeah.
And the driveway drains to Lambert's Lane as opposed to an 8-foot runoff to the river itself. So it's a much longer travel path. We have proposed along the edge of the driveway a crushed stone trench, proposed crushed stone trench here. The crushed stone trench would kind of be a first defense if there was any sort of spill or anything in the driveway. That's what we've proposed.
I assume if any automotive fluids were to make their way to Lambert's Lane, they would eventually make their way down to a culvert and then down to Straits Pond. And once it got on the road, I guess.
In a large enough volume, it probably would if it wasn't trapped in a catch basin prior to, a discharge. A lot of catch basins have outlet hoods on them. I don't know if there are catch basins in this portion of Lambert's Lane or not.
Okay.
Turkey Hill doesn't drain directly to Straits Pond. It discharges to the estuary about, 300 feet west of the tide gate. That's not to say that what goes into the estuary doesn't go into Straits Pond. Certainly it does at the tide. But just a point of clarification, it does not discharge directly to Straits Pond.
Thank you.
Well, as much as I hate to see development inside of the resource and the buffer areas here. This property is already developed. Seems
Yep.
to me that moving a driveway away from Turkey Run and actually kind of using the garage as kind of a buffer, I think is a plus. So
I agree,
I think
Yeah.
I'm,
I agree.
I agree too.
Yep.
Greg, I just had one question. Do we have the test pit data for the dry well system?
No, you don't have that in your packet.
Oh, okay.
So, because there wasn't a full stormwater report.
Right,
generated,
right.
Because there wasn't a bylaw filing.
Yep.
But it's generally a sandy loam soil at the site. We are confident that there's soil there to support it.
any additional comments by commissioners,
No,
public? Okay, Chris McFarland makes a motion to close the public hearing and to issue an order of conditions for NOI 22-21. Sorry, 22-30 for the attached garage at 34 Lambert Lane. Do I have a second?
second,
Having a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions for NOI 22-30. We'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 5-0-0. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
I think you're here for the next one now, right?
That's correct.
Oh,
Also on the line should be,
Wait,
Sorry,
just give
Mr.
us
Chair,
one
we also
second.
have to issue a variance for the work in the 50-foot buffer. Sorry.
Apologize. Okay,
Good catch.
we'll make a motion to issue a variance for work within the buffer and resource zone area at 34 Lambert Lane. Do I have a second?
Second,
Having a motion and a second, we'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 5-0-0. Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Okay, our next hearing this evening is NOI 22-21 and stormwater permit 22. I don't have it. Do you have the number for that one, Charlotte?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Sorry, I think it's,
No, I probably can look it up very quickly myself.
22-21.
sorry, I'm pulling up my trackers too.
I have it here and it's not on this one either.
It's 22-17 for the stormwater permit.
Okay, and that's for 31 Dolan Lane, which was continued from August 11th. We have Greg Morris and Brad Holmes here.
yes.
Take it away, Greg.
Great, thank you. Again, for the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer. I'm going to do a screen share representing the property owner, Lot A, Dolan Lane Realty Trust. This is a notice of intent and a stormwater permit associated with a new single-family home. Just going to recap the project. I know it was open previously, and then I'll go over the additional information that was submitted since the last meeting. The existing site, approximately 4.3 acres in size. It's an existing vacant, undeveloped piece of property. Brad Holmes is our professional wetland scientist. He's on the call here as well. He delineated on the site 2 wetland resource areas. In blue right here is an isolated vegetated wetland, and associated with that, the 25-foot buffer line highlighted in green. And then at the bottom of the screen, there's the C and the D series of a bordering vegetated wetland, which kind of runs along the lot line at the bottom here. The
Excuse me,
proposals,
Greg, could I ask you to zoom in a little bit?
yes, yep.
Sorry.
So in blue is the C series and the D series wetland along this bottom lot line. The proposal here is to construct a new single-family home at this location. We had proposed a new septic system, a new potable water supply well on the site. In stormwater, we had proposed dry wells for the roof associated with the house. All of that work being outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to the BVW and outside of the 25-foot buffer zone to the IVW. But what is inside the buffer is the access driveway. What we proposed is this driveway here being a paved driveway down to Dolan Lane, which is on the right-hand side of the screen here. That driveway would have adjacent to it a subsurface electric service, which would come off of an existing utility pole on Dolan Lane and provide electrical service to the house. Also adjacent to the driveway, highlighted in green here, is a proposed rain garden, which would take runoff from the driveway in front lawn surfaces for treatment. We put together a planting plan for that rain garden area. This was filed as what's referred to as a limited access project. The portion of the site that's buildable out here is the portion where we have the single family home proposed. Unfortunately, there's no upland access that you can get to that portion of the site without going through a buffer zone, either to the IVW or to the BVW. And in this case here, where we have the proposed driveway, we actually traverse a portion of the BVW. We are proposing approximately 970 square feet of wetland alteration. That would be replicated at a ratio of 2:1 in 2 locations. This highlighted green area being one of those locations, and then this highlighted green area being the second location to provide that 2:1 replication ratio. In looking at this
Look, we lost you.
Hello.
layout, we did evaluate several, so we looked at several alternatives. And
Lost.
Greg, you're cutting out on us. Earth to Greg.
Greg, sorry, we can't hear you. Brad, I'm not sure if he can hear us, but
I can hear you fine.
okay.
I'll try to, I can send, I'm sure Greg will try to reconnect. I can try to go through this while Greg's reconnecting. The plan that Greg pulled up was the alternatives review to show the driveway to the south and the driveway to the north. So he was
Yeah, he's reconnecting.
right.
Sorry, I can try to pull that up. Let me-
Okay.
Was that the first analysis or analysis A?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was a,
Okay, I'll pull that one up.
maybe with you running the screen, Charlotte, it'll give
Yeah, that might help him.
Greg more bandwidth to just use audio.
Yeah, that definitely might help him. I don't see him on right now, but I'll keep an eye on the attendee list if he jumps back on.
Even if he can call in.
Yeah, that too. That'll be helpful.
So just for the commission while we're waiting here, we have reached out to town council about this bit of a dilemma. The fact that both potential access points go through wetland. In reading the bylaws, Charlotte uncovered the fact that access has to be given either on the property or on an adjacent property owned by the same owner. So, it seems that we are going to have to consider some alternative to, which may impact the wetland, but we're gonna have to consider something to allow access to this property.
Correct, yeah, so that was the, it's the 88-2 policy for limited projects and roadways. So the applicant is proposing a different option to go through an abutting parcel owned by somebody else. So we can look at that as an additional option, but yeah, in terms of at least with the parcel itself, it's the abutting parcel isn't owned by the applicant to my knowledge. So, you know, usually when you're looking at these projects, if there isn't an easement that's even on the table, you're supposed to look at what, you know, the chair just described, to look at an upland portion of the lot that would extend into the upland area and access the road.
So wait a minute, it's not clear to me whether or not an easement through a third party's property is contemplated by our bylaws.
I don't know about our bylaws specifically, but at least with the policy for the roadway crossing, and Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, it refers specifically just to the parameters for the parcels that the owner, you know, owns. But I don't think there's anything against looking into an easement for an abutting parcel, as long as obviously both parties are willing, and that should be obtained in writing. I know that based off of our last discussion that the easement needs to be finalized, and that documentation should definitely be, you know, there if this project were to get approved through the easement. But at least with, you know, considering only the options on the applicant's parcel, that's what we look at. We look at whether or not you can access an upland portion of the, you know, outside of the buffer zone and outside of the resource, I'm sorry, outside of the resource area to the road. But, you know, obviously we don't really have that option here either way. You're going through the IVW or the BVW and the buffer zones either way.
So.
Sorry, if that makes any sense, Brad, please feel free to correct me if I missed anything on that policy.
No, Greg is trying to call in. His phone is ending in
Okay.
06.
Okay, I can pull that up.
But you're correct. I mean, the policy is basically crafted so that you're trying to exhaust all the available avenues to gain access without having a crossing. And when you're exhausted that, then the limited project provisions for the driveway crossing is permittable, and even permittable under the state regulations if beyond 5,000 square feet, which is the maximum allowance for BVW. But we're not at that limit, but that's how that provision reads.
Brad, could you tell me why explain a little bit the locations of the proposed restored wetland areas, specifically the one that's like right against Dolan Lane? Seems that like that location would be more susceptible to disturbance and invasive species. Is there somewhere on the property that's further away that might be more I don't know.
Well, good question. That wetland, especially closer to Dolan Lane, is actually accept a lot of runoff from the roadway. So the replication there along that section of Dolan Lane will actually provide a little bit more flood storage in the wetland. We're at a 2-to-1 ratio, so we're kind of covered both ways, but you could expand the wetland further away, you know, and bump up the other area further from the road. We just felt that if we break it up, we can kind of expand the wetland in either direction and actually provide a little bit more flood storage coming off the road.
My recollection was, Brad, that there was going to be a box culvert cut through that road at some point by the property owner across the street that you were representing. Can you comment about that?
I remember we were working on the property to the east, and we were talking about improvements as a whole so that we could improve that wetland. I don't remember the details off the top of my head on what we left that at. As far as the culvert connection or improvement.
So if I remember correctly, the applicant offered as a suggestion, putting in a box culvert, but by putting in a box culvert, the isolated vegetative wetland to the plan right would then become part of the bordering vegetative wetland, and the buffers would then get larger. So that was actually scrapped as an idea,
I think that's right. Yeah.
and he kept it as an isolated vegetative wetland.
Of course,
Yeah, so we actually have a special,
the driveway itself truncated the bordering vegetated wetland itself. So that was really a thorny issue there. They basically created an isolated vegetated wetland when they put that driveway in.
yeah, we also did issue a special condition. I just pulled up the order that the proposed box culvert under Dolan Lane is not approved under that order of conditions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What happened to our diagram?
Could you bring that back?
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to pull up the order?
No. We want the diagram.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Greg, are you back with us?
I'm back via phone. I don't know what happened to my internet here, but it
Okay.
doesn't appear to be coming back.
That's
So,
fine. So did you have anything else, or should we just continue on with questions?
I would say continue on with questions. I was about to show you the alternatives that we looked at. I
Yep.
believe we summarized them in a letter to you, and although our design represents, I believe, the largest of the wetland alterations at 970, we felt that it was the preferred alternative because it's the least amount of land disturbance, it's the least amount of ledge removal, and provides the greatest setbacks to Wheelwright Park #1, as well as our abutter at 25 Dolan Lane, in that it is permittable, being that it's less than 1,000 square feet of BVW alteration. And that even though it is 970 square feet, that because of what's outlined in that letter with respect to ledge removal and land disturbance alteration, that it is permittable as designed. And then I was just going to turn it over to you. Yep.
Greg, got a question for you. I look at this diagram and I understand you're happy with it, and probably everyone proposing is happy with it. But I look at somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet of buffer zone that's going to be eliminated in a beautiful verdant wildlife area, wildlife habitat by our definition. And I have some problems with that. And I'm trying to see any sort of reason why I should approve this project, given not just the replication of the resource area, but the fact that you have made no attempt whatsoever to make any replication or to ease the amount of devastation that you're creating in the 50 and the 100-foot buffer zone that we're staring at right now. We just ignore it. And I don't take that very easily. So could you address that for a second?
Absolutely, because I feel that that statement is inaccurate. We looked at alternatives, and I provided you with 2 different alternatives that we looked at. So those 2 alternatives you'll see wrap the driveway around the isolated vegetated wetland up top.
Yeah.
And we provided a letter that documented in a matrix what the alterations of resource area and the alterations of the land disturbance were with those other alternatives. Okay, so we did look at that. And while this one, again, let me just open up that document here. Alternative A had 950 feet of wetland alteration, and alternative B had 147 square feet versus our proposed design is 970. So
Yeah, you're talking about resource area. I'm talking about the combination of resource area and buffer zone, 50-foot and 100-foot, which you're chewing away in the first proposal you made, which is at least 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 square feet that are being dealt in a way which we have never dealt with before. We don't allow heavy equipment into buffer zones. That's our policy. Never have, and I don't think we ought to start now. So I don't know how you can go ahead with, if we maintain our standards as a conservation commission. And you're gonna
Sure. So
be taking soil out, you're taking stone out of the buffer zone, you're bringing in fill, you're tearing it apart. This is in proposal 1. And we've never allowed that. And I understand you're full of numbers and all your numbers look good and all that, and they all add up. But the fact is, this is a travesty from an ecological and a dealing with buffer zones and resource area and ecological viewpoint.
Can we look at alternative B? Alternative A really is a fairly dramatic illustration. Alternative B has appears to have far less impact on the wetland, the isolated vegetated wetland, and the buffer itself, because of the reduction in fill that's necessary to prop up that driveway. It requires a good deal more removal of bedrock. There's no doubt about that. But let's face it, if there's going to be a driveway there, whether you're removing bedrock or not, that's alteration of the surface that you have to consider. And it's mostly, it barely touches the wetland itself, and it is an isolated vegetated wetland, which is barely mentioned in the state wetland regulations. It's really something that's a local bylaw. We try to protect those isolated vegetated wetlands, but we certainly don't hold them in, and we don't consider them as valuable as bordering vegetated wetlands, hence the 25-foot buffer versus the 100-foot buffer with a 50-foot interior buffer. So that it's except for the removal of bedrock here, which is fairly substantial, but really nothing compared to some of the bedrock removal we've been seeing around town lately. This is really just a flea bite on an elephant compared to some of the stuff we looked at. This doesn't look like a bad alternative to me.
And Tom, at the same time, the removal of the bedrock is not in the buffer zone.
That's right.
It's not resource inhibiting. It's not buffer zone inhibiting. It's just rock being carried away like every other development plot in this town. I clearly agree with you.
Regardless of how much bedrock you remove, there's going to be a driveway on top of any of these alternatives. There's going to be a driveway and there's going to be fill. It's a question of how much. And so certainly for the applicant, this comes down to economics. It's going to cost a lot more to remove 400 cubic yards of bedrock on with this plan than the original plan, no question about it. But that's not our issue. We're here to enforce the bylaw so that the impact is as small as we can make it. It is a limited project, so they are going to have a driveway.
Yeah,
we know that's going to happen. They're going to have a driveway. This one looks to me to have the least impact. Has the biggest impact on their wallet, but it doesn't have it has the smallest impact on the resource and the buffers by a long shot.
Is
Brad,
this isolated vegetated wetland classified as a vernal pool?
no.
It certainly could be one, but we don't know.
Right, I'm just making sure it hasn't been already designated.
It's not identified as a potential by the state, and it's certainly not a certified one.
Chris, I tell you, I've been up there and walked by it 2 or 3 times. There's no moisture in it. It hasn't been any moisture in it now for a month and a half. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a vernal
There
pool.
hasn't been a lot of moisture anywhere.
I know, but it's very dry and it's very overgrown and it doesn't bear any resemblance to a vernal pool, but we should check it out. By the way, when was the demarcation done here? I think it's more than 3 years old, which means we'll have to get it done again.
This was done in 2018, this
So it's 4 years
delineation.
old.
I believe it has the benefit of the 460-day COVID extension, but I will double check that. And if it needs to be rehung, I'll make sure it's rehung.
You can see with it,
So let's
just
just
jump in
work under the
quickly.
assumption that this is accurate. And it's not going to change very much. Certainly when you compare this isolated vegetated wetland, the impact on it is smaller than the impact on the bordering vegetated wetland. And then again, it gets back to what our priorities are in town. It is a town bylaw to protect the isolated vegetated wetlands. And so we have a great deal of discretion here about making a judgment about which is more valuable.
Tom, I think you have to note here also that the amount of destruction of the buffer zone in A and B that we're looking at now is a small fraction of what we're talking about in the first proposal. First proposal, my calculation is 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of destruction of the buffer zone. Here, it's a third of that, if that.
Yeah, I agree, Eric. That second proposal is, going in the buffer zone versus dealing with restoration and actually going through the wetland resource area itself is, I think the second proposal is, from our standpoint, is better.
Far superior.
Brad, in terms of, I know you prepared a memo looking at the area where the driveway would go in these alternatives versus in the BVW. Would you be able to speak to a little bit about that, about, the health of these habitats and what you kind of did to look at that?
Sure. So we looked at each area in accordance with DEP's wildlife habitat evaluations. On that DEP forms, they look for significant wildlife habitat features as listed in the form. Both of those sites do not include those significant habitat features. Both sites are fairly similar. There is some invasive, non-native invasive vegetation at both sites. They're not infested. There is some uniqueness at each site as far as wildlife habitat. The area down near Dolan's Lane is obviously, closer to the roadway and closer to used area. The one to the north is kind of closer to an old farm dump in a sense, or farm historic use area. I wouldn't say they're both degraded. I'd say they're both in fairly decent condition. They're both vegetated wetlands with vegetated buffer zones. I don't think, as far as what we saw, there was one that said, hey, this site's trashed, go with the other site. They're both fairly similar.
Brad, I do appreciate your involvement in this project. You did the demarcation and you are being paid by the applicant, and I understand that, all right? But I spent an hour down there today and I saw a shitload of wildlife down at the lower Dolan side. I didn't spend it up above. There was a skunk down there, deers, salamanders, and everything else. It was moist, it was wet, there were tracks everywhere. It is a wildlife habitat as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about your checklist, DEP checklist and all that. I assume that's scientific, but it clearly is an area that's alive with fauna and flora, and is a very, very nice area. That's the lower one, all right? I can't speak for the other one. The other one's dry, all right? There's nothing to be noticed up there. This one's moist, the bottom one, and has significant wildlife in it right now.
And everything's, as we know, because of the drought, I think that the road runoff helps to support that other wetland system. But point taken. Thank you.
In terms of wildlife, I think if there's any doubt here, we should bring in a Mass Audubon to do an audit of the wildlife habitat area in order to get what I would call an independent review of which area from a wildlife preservation viewpoint, protection viewpoint is more important, because I think we're all sort of talking off the top of our heads. None of us are experts, and we have the time to do it, and we ought to do it right. And someone like Mass Audubon would do a very, very thorough review. And I think that they'd love to come in and actually come through and look and see whether this is classified as a vibrant wildlife habitat, the one down on Dolan Lane? Because I think it is, but apparently that's disputed.
Well, Eric, I think our bylaws talk about kind of unique wildlife habitat or endangered species wildlife habitat. I think town council made it fairly clear that it, unless there was some indication of a endangered species or a habitat that was going to be altered to the point of being destroyed, a single lot is not going to impact,
Okay.
the range of deer and coyote and things like that. So,
Mr. Chairman, all I can do is quote page 30, section 28, and it's all there. The town can say it's bullshit, doesn't mean anything, but if you read through it, it's none of the stuff about, rare species or anything else. It talks about vibrant animal habitat. Doesn't talk about rare skunks or lizards or salamanders. It talks about a place where animals live. There you go. Under definition of wildlife, 28B.
This is, yeah, I was gonna say this is section 28, right?
Yeah, or section 28A. Wildlife habitat means the land, pond, pool, vegetative, geographic characteristics that provide feeding, breeding, nesting, hibernating, travel, and protective cover for all wildlife, both resident and migratory wildlife species, including game and non-game wildlife species. So that's all we're applying.
I would add that with either alternative, we're only disturbing 21% of the site. We're keeping, 79% of the site in its natural, unaltered condition, the majority of which is upland land area.
The upland land area, as we say in our rules and regulations, is very important to the wildlife values, as you realize, Greg.
Yes, we're preserving 79% of it unaltered.
Could you give me the breakdown of that 71? Because there's a lot of house going in there, a lot of driveway, and a lot of clearing of land.
Sure. So if you look at our proposed limit of clearing with the alternatives, what you'll see and what we've written down on all our permits, if you draw an outline on that,
yeah,
39,000 square feet. That 39,000 square feet, you divide that by the total land area or lot area, which is 188,000. You end up with 20%.
What about the driveway coming in down below?
That
Okay,
includes
sorry,
the driveway.
this is in the other option, right? Yeah, okay. It's the other option.
So the other option disturbs 41,000 square feet instead of 39,000. We're still preserving, 79 to 80% of the site with either alternative.
So there's really no difference in terms of preservation between alternative B and your original proposal. Is that accurate?
It is, and what that table summarized in the letter that I sent you was the total land disturbance, and the one that we had is 38,600 as we designed it. That alternative B is 40,800. So I mean, it's a little bit more land disturbance, and it's more impervious surface because of the driveway length. But yes, it is less wetland alteration. But overall site and the entire site out there certainly is great wildlife habitat. I mean, it abuts Wheelwright Park, and absolutely it's wildlife habitat. In either scenario, we're preserving, 79 to 80% of the site.
I suppose, Greg, what I'd like to see is that chart, but with a wetland alteration, including the 50 and 100 foot buffer zone in that figure.
Yeah.
Please.
Yep, we could add that.
I think you probably see that would change dramatically. I think, I'm just guessing, because I know in proposed design, we're talking 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of buffer zone being chewed up of 50.
We are.
And it's not the case in alternative A and B. And that would change dramatically the figures, I think.
Yeah, if we add those in, alternative B would have probably the least of those three.
Yeah.
I would agree with.
Because you're
our-
only dealing with a 25-foot buffer.
Yeah. So the,
But not
So
only
then
that,
it-
but the amount of fill that you would use an alternative A to support that road at an appropriate grade, because you're going over the top of the ledge instead of cutting through it to the east of it, is pretty substantial. So you can see the wetland alteration is not greatly different than the proposed design for alternative A. Whereas alternative B, by cutting into the bedrock, you can achieve that acceptable driveway grade, and your wetland alteration is 150 square feet. So that looks really attractive to me.
Yeah, what I would challenge you with is if you look at wetland alteration and add in the 50 and 100-foot
Okay,
buffer.
and I take your point, and Eric, I
Yeah.
agree completely with you about it. That we do need to consider that the buffers themselves have value.
Yeah.
And in the case of alternative B, it's a 25-foot buffer, and there's much, even if it was a 50-foot buffer, there's much less of it being disrupted.
Certainly.
Greg, sorry, I sent this to you in a comment, but I just wanted to kind of, walk through it. In the last hearing, Jeff had mentioned that the abutter was potentially not open to revising that easement line in any way to get the driveway out of the BVW. It might be good to kind of see that in writing, just to kind of eliminate any possible considerations for easement access, because that would, if you move the driveway up, that could, in theory, move it out of a wetland area entirely, and then we'd just be dealing with the buffer zones. But that's only if the abutter is willing to consider that. So I don't know if that's something that was discussed at all when, the analysis is being prepared, or if it just wasn't even considered because she's already said she doesn't want to fix this line in any way. But is that
Yeah.
something that could be looked at, or is that like not even an option with the abutter?
I'm told that the abutter was not open to changing that easement location. I don't have it in writing.
Okay.
I will try to get something in writing to that effect.
Okay. Yeah, just to eliminate any of that, because my mind was saying,
Sure.
oh, just inch this driveway up, and then you're just dealing with the buffer. But yeah, if it's not possible, it's not possible.
We don't. No.
Well, it may be worthwhile to explain to the abutter that at this time, at least part of the commission is leaning towards a preference for the upper driveway, and if she may reconsider how much of an easement she's willing to give.
Yeah, we will reach out to her again.
But what zone is this in? What
This is in the B zoning district, Residence B.
residence B, and what's a conformable lot size in B?
In the B zoning district, minimum size is 35,000 square feet with 50 feet of frontage. But this is an easement. This is not a land purchase. Just an
Right.
easement.
I guess what I'm looking at here is it conceivable that the Karcher Revocable Trust could subdivide this? And if they give an easement, they better get a good price for it.
I don't know if that's possible or not.
So Greg, I'm hearing a few things here. Obviously those who have spoken have suggested that the alternative is more is their preference. I'm not, you know, the disruption to the habitat, I'm not sure where that goes, but is there, how would you like to proceed on this?
Yeah, I think I'd like, what's your next meeting date and then the meeting date after that?
September 22nd and October the
It's October 8th.
8th.
Hold on, let me double check.
It seems a little far out.
Wait, sorry. Is it it's the, I think it's the 6th.
Yeah, that should be right.
Yeah, sorry.
October 6th, and then the other one was September 22nd.
Correct.
So I guess I would like to request a continuance to September 22nd so that we can go back and look at option B a little bit further. And, you know, if my client is amenable, we would move forward with option B and present that on the 22nd.
Greg, you also indicated you would redo your chart, including the,
Yes,
the buffer zones, please. I think that would be worthwhile. Okay,
I will add those numbers in.
thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All right, then this hearing is now continued till September 22nd. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Okay, that was our last hearing for this evening. We've already talked about continuations. Charlotte, you have a couple certificates of compliance?
Yes, sorry, let me close a lot of my tabs here, but I'll go through the first one. This one is a little bit older, so I have one from 2010. So this was a notice of intent that was submitted for 19 Atlantic Avenue, but the work was actually for 17 Atlantic Avenue because that's where the utilities were being connected through the 17 Atlantic Ave property. So basically, this notice of intent submission is most likely related to a housing sale for why they're requesting a COC. So obviously the utilities have been buried, you know, since 2010, but I did go out to the site. I talked to the property owner for 19 Atlantic Ave, and we did locate the utilities in the general location of where they were approved. There was a plan, a modification, basically putting all the utilities within the driveway and the right of way. They were originally supposed to go across the yard area. Sorry, my computer's running very slow, but they were supposed to go across, you know, the yard area on 17 Atlantic Ave, and the owner had changed their mind after we issued an order of conditions. So they were supposed to go through where you see this planter, but now all utilities are underneath the existing road. The as-built did confirm that, and I located, you know, some of them on site that were just extremely visible. I did make note that these catch basins obviously do not look good, so I'm going to mention that to DPW. But overall, there were no, other than the utility pole that National Grid installed being a little bit closer to the road than originally permitted, there were no deviations with this old order of conditions. And for the order, they list a handful of conditions that they want as ongoing conditions. The only thing is, if you look at the order, they mostly relate to construction. So this was like a standard boiler template that a handful of conditions would survive the issuance of a COC. But looking at each of them, it pretty much relates to the construction project during that time, not really as an after the fact condition. So, I mean, I can defer to the commission on that if we wanted to issue in accordance with our old boilerplate, or if we want to say a lot of these conditions basically were not applicable. Same thing with the herbicides one. We tend to issue that now as an ongoing condition, but it doesn't really apply for this project. But I guess, does anybody have any major questions? Because, you know, again, from what I can see and from what Cavanero confirmed on the as-built, all the utilities go through the existing road. So there was actually less disturbance than originally permitted, you know, to the buffer zones. And sorry, my computer's running really slow, so I apologize if these were frozen for a while. But does anyone have any concerns or questions about this one?
No.
No.
No. Okay, do we want to vote on this one or do you want me to go through both of them?
No, let's quickly take a vote.
Okay,
Make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for NOI 10-16, 17 Atlantic Avenue. Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second to issue a certificate of compliance, take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 5-0.
okay, great. So I'll go on to the second one. This one is for 88 Beach Street. So this was a 2020 notice of intent, 20-25. This one actually has a stormwater permit, but at this time, the owner has just requested a partial COC. This project was split into two projects. One of them was the construction of a small dock that was mostly just a ramp, concrete platform and float. And so I'm just going to show you guys pictures here of the existing conditions. They noted, the engineer noted 3 deviations, and she's actually on the call if we have any questions. The first one was the concrete slab is slightly different from what was proposed because the slab was lined up with the the crumbling sections of the existing wall. And then another one of the deviations is that 2 4-inch pipe sections are temporarily here for seasonal purposes, just to keep the kayaks. And then the third deviation was these wooden steps were installed. Originally, the plan was just supposed to have this concrete platform. And I don't know if you guys can see it right here, but they kind of connected the concrete platform to the existing crumbling stone area. So that's why it had to get reconfigured. It is proposed in the original plan to be reconstructed, basically. So they kind of just changed this outlook a little bit from the slab that's supposed to just connect to the metal gangway. But one of the main deviations here is just that they added these wooden steps when it was just supposed to be a concrete platform. But they, installed these to, have access to be able to walk on the ground and like take their kayaks out probably. But they mostly utilized just the gangway space. But other than that, those are the only deviations that I noted. I didn't observe any additional ones. But that's very minuscule. There were 3 special conditions that were part of the template that would apply to this project, most applicable to this project. One of them was no heavy equipment, vehicles or barges permitted on the resource areas, essentially. I wasn't obviously here at the time, but I do know that the previous agent, he didn't have any photos, but I did see some of the pre-existing conditions, and it doesn't look like, at least based on my photos and the photos that he took, that there was any heavy equipment scars or boat scars or anything like that that looked really evident, at least currently. And the contractor, which is Harbor Mooring, who does most of the dock constructions in town, they don't use a barge. So they have a standard process of working from the ground area, upland area, and installing everything as they move down. And then they use they didn't do it for this case, but in most cases for docks, they use a pneumatic tripod hammer. So they don't bring in any barges or heavy equipment, and they keep all of the compressors and stuff in an upland location. But again, this one was just a metal gangway for the most part and a float. So this was a very short dock. The second condition, which is I would suggest if we were to issue a partial COC for the dock, the seasonal ramp, floats, other components are to be stored at a suitable upland location outside of all protected resource areas. So again, not applicable for construction, but definitely applicable for an ongoing condition. And then the third condition relates to the garage work, which I'll just say has not yet been done. The owner sounds like they are still debating on whether or not they want to even do the garage that was supposed to be at a lower portion of the driveway, I believe partially in the 50-foot buffer. So it was a condition about replacing trees that are going to be removed, but that portion of the work is undone. It has not been done yet. So that's why they're just requesting a partial COC for the dock. And then if they decide not to do the garage, they would close out the permit completely with the stormwater and the COC, just a full COC, but they still have, a couple years to decide as to whether or not they want to do the garage, the other half of this work. So does anyone have any questions so far?
Why are they coming for a partial COC?
I think just to get the dock out of the way, but actually I can promote Carmen to speak if she has any additional reasons, but for the most part, I think it's just to take care of this portion of the work, which was already done. It'll be a different contractor, obviously, for the garage, but they kind of just wanted to, you know, get this out of the way first, and then they'll make a decision on what they want to do with the garage.
And how is the float anchored?
The float is, oops, sorry, I got my photos again.
I'm not gonna be able to tell.
Sorry. I think I took as close up photos of the, there we go. So it's pretty much just, you know, sitting on the, you know, the structure here that rises and falls with the tide. So it's not
Yeah, but
strapped.
it's anchored so it doesn't float away. Do you have any idea how that is?
It looks like it's
Yes.
anchored right here.
Hi, yes, actually what this is, which is what we've been calling for, especially in Little Harbor and with all of our floats that bottom out, is structural ramps. So what happens is this ramp has two sets of very sturdy hinges on either end, one that connects it, in this case, to the concrete landing, and one that connects it, the hinges on the sides. And I believe there's one on the front as well that connects it to the float. And what this does, and you can't use this in the ocean, for example, but in situations like Little Harbor where you don't see a very heavy current, you can use this and not have to use the chains under the float. So it has minimal impact. Of course, it bottoms out, but it doesn't have the dragging of the chains.
Okay, I'll make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for NOI 20-20, a partial certificate of compliance for the dock only at 88 Beach Street. Do I have a second?
Can we put it with the ongoing condition for 55 that the ramp has to be, or the float has to be stored away from the resource area? It's condition number 55.
That makes sense.
How are they gonna get that ramp out of there? Thing is
That's a
huge.
good question. The condition is the seasonal ramp floats and other components are to be stored at a suitable upland location outside of all protected resource areas. So they probably have to unhinge the the ramp and the float.
That is a very good question. And I
Yeah.
haven't seen, we've had structural ramps in several other locations, and I have not checked them out after the season, so.
Charlotte will. And then they'll tell you can't do it. All right. So I'm gonna make a motion to issue a partial certificate of compliance for the dock only, with the condition that the float and ramp need to be stored in an upland condition each winter. Do we have dates? Do we have anything that goes with that?
No, it's mostly it's just
Off-season.
seasonal.
Okay,
on
that's
the
fine.
condition.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second, we'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
and Chris McFarland. Aye. That vote passes 5-0-0.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, Charlotte.
Okay. Charlotte, you want to give us any updates?
Sure, yeah, so for bylaw stuff, we got some input from legal counsel. So essentially, she didn't have any concerns about this proposed edit that if we wanted to still make it. I did ask her, I think, Chris, you had some good questions about, well, what happens when we change this? Like, what are any repercussions? And she just said there's really no grandfathering in terms of, whenever this is, if this were to go into effect, there's no grandfathering. So basically, once this is implemented, any project that comes to us with an IVW or an isolated land subject to flooding would have to have that 100-foot buffer instead of a 25-foot buffer. So we wouldn't obviously backtrack with any projects that have already had a 25-foot buffer. It would just be, once this is implemented, every isolated vegetated wetland that's surveyed for any proposed project would have to have that 100-foot buffer. So I don't know if anybody wants to keep it as 25 feet as is based on some of our conversations tonight, or if we wanted to still move forward with this. I would change the date here, obviously, whenever we submit it. I did talk to council about, I don't know if we want to mess up this section, but basically we list a handful of resource areas and we define the buffer zones, but there are a lot of town bylaws like Duxbury and Hingham that go into more detail. So theirs is very descriptive. So again, I don't know if we want to change this or rock the boat too much with our proposal, or if we just want to keep this, but this is just so you can see what Duxbury has, that they list all of these as protected resource areas, and they are under the Wetland Protection Act. They just go into more detail about it. And then they say land within 100 feet of any of the areas referenced above. And so they basically just kind of, have a beefier section than we do. So it's only if anybody wanted to update that, but Amy, our legal counsel, said if we wanted to, we can. It's up to us. But at least she didn't have any concerns with this main proposed edit. And then as for the vernal pool definition, I updated it with the Duxbury language like we discussed at the last meeting. However, the one question that I just had, and basically council said this is up to us as a commission as to whether or not we want to modify it. I tried to find where they got this number. I like this definition, but my one question for you guys is, do we want to keep something like contains at least 200 cubic feet of water at some point during most years? I've tried to look at where they got that number, but I could not find it. So I tried to call the Duxbury agent, but didn't get in touch with them in time. So again, if we want to keep this Duxbury definition, the only thing I added, which council didn't seem to have a concern with, is if we wanted to clarify that the 100 buffer to the vernal pool is a no disturb area, unless you're given a variance from the commission, which would apply to our section 13. So those are the only changes I made to the Duxbury language. Council didn't seem to have a concern with it, but I'll open this up to the commission. And then the last proposal is, we did talk about the definition for isolated land subject to flooding. There's a handful of definitions in the Wetland Protection Act and in Duxbury and Hingham and other bylaws, but I don't know if we want to rock the boat here because we're already giving it a 100-foot buffer in the section above. So I really don't know if we want to modify this too much. And then the last edit was, I haven't been able to get.
You cut out, Charlotte.
You're dead.
Uh-oh. Can you guys hear me?
Kind of.
Kind of. Well, the riverfront area definition is definitely the most confusing in terms of how do we update this, because there's so much good information out there from the Wetland Protection Act, from the Rivers Protection Act, from other bylaws. Everything has different, more in-depth information than our definition. So I don't know if we want to just leave this alone and just not touch it, or if we want to revise it. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. I feel bad if I'm cutting out because I can't leave this meeting. I run it.
So I would say that if the state is broad enough to cover this, then maybe we shouldn't mess with it.
Yeah, so the state definition gives a lot of information where they basically just define, so the state definition is here, where they're defining mean high water, and then they're basically defining this. So this is the riverfront definition from the Wetland Protection Act. A lot of other town bylaws reference this exact section, 310 CMR 10.58-2. So this is really all the detail they go into. And then when you go further into the definition for mean high water line, that's in 310 CMR 10.23. It's this. So again, I don't know if we want to change our definition at all, or if we want to just keep it, or if we want to modify it with any of this, or just say the same definition as 310 CMR 10.58-2 and whatever. But it's up to, you know, I know, Tom, you had some information about the mean higher tide line. If it
Yeah,
is.
so
a
this is,
tidal
so
river.
this is not very well, the state is not very well stated because there are two mean high water.
Mhm,
There's a mean higher high water and a mean lower high water.
mhm,
And let me explain what that means. Every day, there's two high tides, most days.
Mhm.
There's two high tides, and one is always higher than the other. They're not equally high.
Mhm.
So the mean higher high water mark is the average of those high tides on each day.
Mhm.
And the mean low high water, it's just called mean high water actually,
mhm,
would be the average of the lower ones.
mhm.
And for the most part, they're not greatly different, a few tenths of feet, something like that. And so they're not specific here.
No.
And that's why I think that it's probably that's the only advantage we would have. And the only place this would really apply to would be the Gulf River, because for example, the outlet from Little Harbor is not considered a river, doesn't have a river mouth as defined by the state. So it's not a river, even though it looks like one. It's not. But the Gulf is, even though it behaves just like Little Harbor, it does actually have a state designated river mouth, which is basically right at the bridge. And so this is the only place that this would be defined.
Yeah.
And we could get in it, we could get into it. We've already sort of started down this path on one of our more recent applicants of what do they mean by mean high water here. They talk about the arithmetic mean of high water heights observed over a specific 19 years metatonic cycle. And so it's not clear whether they mean the mean higher high water. I didn't realize this at the time, but I do now, or whether they actually mean lower high water. So we have an opportunity to make a decision about this, I think. It's only, like I say, in the Gulf River, it's probably only a few tenths of feet. Like, in fact, I can look at it right now to see what the difference is. I've got it right in front of me. It's actually 0.4 feet. It's about half a foot difference. And in general, that's not going to make much of a difference if there's a steep bank or even a modestly sloped bank. It's not going to make a lot of difference. So I don't think that it's important one way or the other. We can leave it off or we can leave that in. It's not going to really have much of an impact. It's looking at getting back to that first one, the isolated vegetated wetland. I think we need to consider this is all going to go as a package, right? Each one of these changes is not a separate thing on the warrant. So all of our changes will live or die by the least popular thing we put in there.
Right.
And from a political perspective, I think that this is the one, because this is going to have the most impact on the most people. Is extending that buffer from 25 feet to 100.
Yeah.
And so everything else we change might just fail because some people think, oh, well, this is impinging on my property rights too much. So this is the one we have to be careful about, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely those are really good comments because you know, I think Chris, you had those same comments as well. But at least with every other town around us, they all have 100 feet. So I know Cohasset, obviously, you know, it's not the same town as Hingham or Duxbury or Marshfield, but pretty much everybody around us has this 100-foot buffer. So it's up to us as to whether or not we want to meet that expectation of everyone around us. But yeah, since Cohasset is a smaller town, you know, I'm sure there might be some comments about that.
Charlotte, if you want to kill something on the warrant, all you have to do is say, this is the way Hingham does it.
Yeah.
And it's doomed.
Lovely.
It's your warrant is doomed.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I know council specifically recommended looking at Duxbury, so I don't know if that will create any controversy if we reference Duxbury's, but Yeah, it's up to us. I mean, if we want
We
to
could
keep it,
probably reference the canals on Mars and it'd still be bad. So
so does anybody want to take this off the list? It sounds like we got some reservations here. Unless we want to change
I
it.
would think Eric would want to weigh in on this. What do you, Eric? What do you think about this?
Oh, Eric, you're
You're
muted.
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 Eric, you're muted.
All right, you lost your chance.
I heard Chris say I lost my chance. I will accept that.
No, go ahead.
No,
Come on.
nothing. I pass.
I'd
Oh,
be
you
inclined,
wanna-
I'd be inclined to not roll the dice on it.
Okay. So not even like just keep it as 25 feet and not change it to 50 feet with.
I
a
mean, I would like to see it larger,
Yeah,
but if all of our other changes would be put in jeopardy because this will have the most impact
mm-hmm,
of any of our changes.
mm-hmm,
I'd be willing to throw this one under the bus to get the other stuff through.
okay.
I don't understand why this would impact the other changes. I don't see where you're
It's
going.
because they're all bundled on the warrant as one article that they're going to vote on. And if there's a fly in that ointment, which this might be it, so people would vote all those other changes down just to kill this one.
So this changes in a different section. So even though it'd be on the same warrant, this would be proposed in 260-2, and then our definition changes would be in 260-8. So I apologize, this is the first time I'm going through this process. So can they shoot down this and not the other one, or it's everything on the warrant?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think we vote on this section by section, do we?
I don't think so. I think they're gonna do it as changes to the Conservation Commission
Okay.
bylaws.
Yeah, it also has to go through, even if it gets approved at town meeting, also has to go through the Attorney General as well. And people at any point could comment, appeal. That's how I understand it, but yeah. This will be open, obviously, for public comment too, even before it gets to town meeting, of course. So there's definitely going to be plenty of input that's received before this goes to town meeting in December, but
So maybe
yeah.
leave it as it is, and if we start taking flack for that, we can remove, do we have an opportunity to remove it?
No.
I can pull up the schedule if that's helpful.
Can we amend, once it's on the warrant, I think we can make an amendment for a
Mhm.
while. There's a time limit on how long you can make an amendment.
Yeah, let me pull up the, I'm gonna pull up the schedule again to see if we can, what our options are. Let's see.
Well, it's interesting, Tom, because during our last hearing, you mentioned that the state doesn't really, give much information to the isolated vegetated wetland, and here we are making ours more stringent. And I don't know, it seems to me that, I mean, somewhere down the line, we're gonna end up in court over it. Someone's gonna say, I bought this piece of land back when it was 25, and now they're telling me I can't build on it. So, I don't know.
Deadline for citizens petitions is September 20th. Committee review, they approve warrant publication, goes to print. Public session on the warrant. So that I think is also public comment. Warrant must be in homes, warrant must be posted. Yeah, I admit I wish I was, this is the first time I'm going through this, but it does seem like they do have time for public comment, but what's not clear here is if we have time to revise this at all. I don't know if once we submit by the 16th, everything is set in stone for the 12th of December.
Yeah, let's not roll the dice.
Let me pull up the
I mean,
thing.
we've seen some otherwise good bylaws
Mhm.
that get shot down because there was one thing in there that was a weak point that the development community could seize on and twist into something that scared people a little bit.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
let's face it, nobody reads this stuff, even if they do go to town meeting. The few people that do go to town meeting, you can bet
don't like
that they really don't look at this very, very
Yeah.
closely. But the developers will look at it very closely.
Mhm.
And that community will stand up and they'll pontificate for 2 or 3 people will stand up, the usual suspects, as you might think, and they'll change people's minds that are actually at town meeting for some other reason that means more to them. I mean, we saw that during the lights, the lights for the baseball field. There, half the quarter of the town meeting was people that were just advocates of this, and they do nothing about the bylaws that were being proposed, really, but the development community basically torpedoed it right in town meeting, very effectively, actually. So I'd hate to see that happen to us.
No, those are very fair points. I've never gone through this process, but that's definitely a possibility of those 3 or 4 people who will make the biggest noise are the ones that are going to see this and be the ones to possibly shoot it down.
So the other item with 200 square cubic feet, that's a lot of water.
Yeah, that's where I was like, I don't know where they're getting this number.
Yeah,
And
I would just take that out because that's,
Okay.
that's 10 by 10 by 2 feet deep. That's a big
Right.
pool.
That was my only hang up on that definition was that volume. I liked everything else about it other than that number.
I checked the NHESP vernal pool guidance because last time I thought that number may have come from somewhere. I did not find that. So unless I'm missing it somewhere, I have no idea where they got that number. It's Duxbury's definition is referenced in other sources, but in terms of, looking at the NHESP vernal pool guidance from 2020, they do mention obviously the free of predatory fish has to hold, water for 2 consecutive conditions during the months of, spring and summer. It also depends on December, if we wanted to say December and June, or if we want to be general. So they definitely have a lot of this. All this information is definitely contributing to vernal pool definitions, except for that 200 cubic yards. I was like, I have no idea where that's coming from. And then, does anyone have any edits or suggestions? This was part of the definition, and then the only thing I added was this. Council didn't seem to have a problem with it, but I know we are talking about that we wanted to make that very clear in our bylaws and regulations. So we could definitely add it to the regulations, but then the question is, do we want to put it in the bylaw language as part of the definition?
Charlotte, were we supposed to vote on this tonight?
If we want, if we wanted, unless we have another meeting, the deadline is the 16th.
No, we're not having another one.
Okay. But does anyone have any concerns with the language that we removed? So I know we were confused as to why we had dates. I haven't seen dates. I've mostly seen between December and June in a given year. We have meets the criteria for state certification, which other laws go into present, they say, regardless of whether the wetland has been certified as a vernal pool by Division of Fisheries Wildlife Services. And then the presumption may overcome, if somebody argues otherwise, they can prove it. But yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing. It's just, it wasn't clear in our bylaws. So I guess, does anyone have a concern with this portion going in the definition?
Oh,
No disturbance area? No, okay. Okay, so we like this. We don't like.
The whole vernal pool doesn't work if it doesn't have a pretty good sized buffer around it.
Yeah.
We could start calling the ponds in the golf course vernal pools. Because, but they're surrounded by turf. So that doesn't make any sense. You need to have habitat around the pool that's protected.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I just wanted to kind of see if you guys had input on, a lot of definitions are between December and June. This Duxbury definition says spring and summer. So I don't know if we want to change that or keep it general. But usually at least Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, have you seen between December and June, or have you seen throughout the whole summer?
I don't think we want to put throughout the whole summer. Our perennial streams have been going dry and as things start to dry up around here. So I think that the two continuous months, somewhere between December and June, is broad, and that's good.
So should we say between December and June?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we already say.
Yep, we just had dates on it for some weird reason.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, somebody could interpret that, that means December 31st to June 1st, but
yeah,
I don't think that it's 6 months there. I don't think that that's
right.
somewhere in there. There's got to be 60 days of water in this pool. And of
Mhm.
course, you and I know from our personal experience breast busting out there and looking at these things that they really start breeding in March and April.
Mhm.
And if there isn't water in March, April, and for that matter, May probably,
Mhm.
it's really not a viable pool. But certainly March and April are critical.
Mhm.
So we've captured that. We've got an envelope that's big enough to capture the breeding season. And I think that's our objective. And
Okay.
I think we've achieved that.
Getting late, Charlotte.
Okay, so I will take this out. So we want to keep,
25 feet.
yep,
25.
I mean, we still have protection for those lesser wetlands.
mhm,
They're still important.
mhm,
And the wetland itself remember, it's a resource, so it's
Right.
it's got all the protection of a full protection of a resource. It's just the buffer that we're
mhm.
Maybe just inch it up. Just go to 26 feet this time.
Yeah, and see if anyone freaks out. Okay, so we eliminated that. We're keeping vernal pool. We like this language. And then are we leaving this alone? That was one thing that we discussed last time. So if we're not touching the buffer and isolated subject to flooding, I don't know if we want to fix this definition at all. I don't know if we need to, but this is just what the Wetlands Protection Act has for isolated land subject to flooding, which is a fairly larger definition than ours. So I don't know how much we want to change this or just leave it be.
isn't that derived from the FEMA maps?
Pretty much, I think so. Wait, it's a, sorry, I'm just reading through this definition here, but this is 310 CMR 10.57-2. And then Duxbury just has a simple definition. So they don't really necessarily indicate FEMA, but they are mentioning, obviously, 100 feet from the highest extent of flooding, but that's their buffer zone. So we're not changing that for us. So I guess, do we want to just leave this as is? Are we happy with this definition, or do you think this needs more clarification?
It's just one that it never comes up before us. It doesn't.
Not
seem
really.
like-
I will say that
It did on Smith Place.
yeah, so I will say that DEP does care about this. So they don't necessarily care about isolated vegetated wetlands, but they do care about this, that this is referenced in the Wetlands Protection Act. So this has like a full definition rather than a potential vernal pool or an isolated vegetated wetland. So they do care about this as a resource area. And oftentimes, there was one instance where an NOI wasn't submitted to DEP because they were only dealing with an IVW, and DEP did not like that because they're like, well, wait, is it an isolated land subject to flooding? So you have to prove that as the applicant. So this is a resource area that they do care about, but I don't know if we want to mess with the definition or just keep it as is.
I think it's fine for right now.
It's fine? Okay. I will remove
I think we
that.
can come back to more of this when we have more time.
Yeah, like I said, I think we should look at this more when we have time. I agree. Okay. So vernal pool, we're happy. Riverfront, how do we want to address this? Tom, I know you had taken out perennial. From what I've seen, it's river or stream. So I don't know if we want to go into more detail about the inner and outer riparian zones, but we kind of already summarized that pretty well. I added this. There's no buffer zone for the riverfront area. And then Tom, this was your edit. Do we want to add anything else from the mean high water definition, the River Protection Act? This was Hingham's language. So I put a bunch of stuff here. I don't know if any of this looks good or if we want to just keep it short.
Did they ever deal with the high water in a tidal river? Does anybody?
I do not know that. That's a great question.
Let me think about it. Does Hingham have one? It may not even have a tidal river.
Can't think of one off the top of my head, but I admit I
Isn't
should
it
know
called
more.
Black River? I think there's one called Black River.
Oh,
Okay.
you know what? The Ware River, I believe, has a river mouth.
Mhm.
I know it does.
Okay.
So that's in Hingham. But apparently they've never thought about this.
No, this is theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, this is straight up from the Wetland Protection Act, and then they go into more detail about defining the mean high water line, but this is their definition. They have a huge section about the preamble and the benefits of the riverfront. So they go into detail about that. A lot of local South Shore bylaws copy that exact language or just reference it. So this is specifically from number 2, which defines riverfront area. And then if you Google this methodology, you can find obviously a lot more information on how to define that. But yeah, this is basically their definition. They just keep it short and sweet in the Wetland Protection Act, and then they go into more detail.
I think we should leave it more or less as it's written.
Okay.
Right now, except
Mhm.
take that tide out of there. There's no such thing as mean higher high tide. It's mean higher high water. That's a definition. That's the scientific definition. Let's use it.
Tidal rivers with a river mouth identified by, so that, wait, do we want to combine this? This looks like 2 portions of a sentence.
Yeah, you can
Tidal-
pick, if you want to fix the grammar, go ahead and do it.
Okay. Shall use the high water line. Wait, hold on. Trying to combine these 2 sentences here. Sorry. It's getting late. I know. Identified by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. With the high.
It was fine as 2 sentences. It doesn't need.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, it was grammatically correct.
It was? Oh, okay. I just didn't think this one was a sentence.
Which one? The first one?
Yeah.
it's not.
Oh, tidal rivers tidal rivers are defined by, or, yeah, that's the one that's
That's okay. Okay, that's it.
Defined by.
defined by a river mouth identified by.
Doesn't have a predicate.
There we go.
Well,
Oop, sorry. I was trying to say this, the high water line for tidal rivers shall be defined by the mean higher high water.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
that sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay, so we like this, took out perennial, added stream, we added that, we like this. There were no other things that I added for now. And from what we discussed last time, it sounds like we want to keep this nice and simple.
Yep.
Okay, so do we, I will clean this up, obviously. I need to make sure that the page breaks, I took out the page breaks for the purposes of editing this because it was a nightmare. So I'm kind of, honestly, I might just keep this and turn it into a PDF. So then it's a working Word document for next year. So I will take all these comments out, but do any commissioners have any other?
So we're not going to try to get it on the warrant this year?
Oh, no, we can. I was going to clean this up and submit it by the 16th. I just want to make sure
Okay,
that we
all
don't
right.
want to add anything else.
Yeah, this is a good test run for us because
Sounds good.
the next one is going to be our stormwater bylaws, which is far more complex.
Mhm.
So this is a baby step. I think we should take it and see if our toes get stepped on.
Oh, Tom, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a sec. We just got a comment. Hi, my name is Frank Agostino. I'm the owner of 34 Lampert's Lane. I had to work late, missed the meeting. What was the outcome? So I'll answer this live. Hi, Frank. Sorry we missed you, but we did approve this project with an order of conditions. So I will be issuing that within 21 days, and I can send that to you, and I'll keep you posted when I'm ready to issue it. But yeah, just wanted to answer that comment. Okay, so do we want to vote on this?
I'm gonna make a motion to accept the changes to the Cohasset wetland bylaws as presented by Charlotte tonight. Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second, we'll take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 500. Okay,
I'll put those together to submit with the warrant, and I guess
All
we'll
right.
see how this goes.
do you need to give us a Sandy Beach update?
No.
You want me to? You guys want me to go through my updates or save them for another time?
Save them.
Okay,
Wait,
All right.
we still have to reorganize the Conservation Commission.
yep, that's the last thing.
So, first thing we need to do is to, fill the roles of the commission. So I'll entertain a motion for secretary. I think Kathy has graciously accepted that role again. So I will make a nomination.
I
to-
second that. I hereby you've done a great job. Keep
Okay,
up
having a
the good work,
motion and a second for Kathy Berrigan to remain as secretary of the Conservation Commission. Take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 400. I'd like to make a motion to name Tom Bell as the vice chairman of the Conservation Commission.
I second that.
Having a motion and a second for Tom Bell to be the vice chair of the commission. Now, you sure, Tom, before we go through this, you don't want to be chair?
Oh, I'm positive about that.
I'd like you to be chair.
I know you would. Maybe next year, Chris.
Tom, you're right around the corner. You're moving up.
I'm counting on it, Tom. All right, having a motion and second for Tom Bell to be vice chair, we'll take a roll call vote. Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 400. Entertain a motion for chair.
Chris
I make a
McFarland.
motion that Chris McFarland remain chair.
Have a second. Have a
Second that.
motion. Have a motion, second. Take a roll call vote. Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre.
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Okay, that vote passes 400. I'm gonna hold off on liaisons till next week or next meeting. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, we will assign liaisons. Charlotte, if you can remember, make sure that makes it on the agenda again next time. Is I see in the audience, there's a Kendra Cooper. Is she by any chance affiliated with one of the liaison groups?
Hi, Kendra. We just noticed you're in the audience. Are you affiliated with any of the liaison groups?
No,
Oh, okay.
just observing.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to make a motion then to deal with, I don't have to make a motion to that. But we're gonna just deal with liaisons next meeting. So I am going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Great meeting, Chris. Thank you.
Aye. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, have a great night. Have a great weekend.
You
Thank you,
guys.
Charlotte, for all your work.
Solid.
You guys
Hey.
likewise.
Okay, bye-bye.
See ya.